Today we are going to be creating a looping animation inside of Maya by using nCloth, and that's it. We won't be using any constraint, and this will be a pretty straightforward setup. So let's get into it. So the first thing is creating our collider, and I'm going to take my simple torus here, and I'm going to change the overall section radius and the overall radius of this torus. So section radius will be, I think, 0.4. That should be good enough. And let's increase some radius subdivision for this to about 40 and 40, and this should be good enough. So I think this is the section radius is a bit too small, so I'm going to increase it back to the default value, which is 0.5. So we have something like this, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is create this as a passive collider. So let's go to FX, nCloth, and passive collider. So we have our passive collider. Let's create our nCloth here. So I'm going to take a simple sphere for this, and as you can see, this is our dimension on the overall. So when this is going to fall, this is going to try to get into the overall torus here. So what I'm going to do is increase a bit of division here to maybe like a 30 and 30, and then we can keep increasing the division when we are doing the final catching and so on. So I'm going to make this as nCloth. So if I play this now, as you can see, we have something like this. So the cloth is you can say pretty lightweight. It doesn't have a lot of mass, so you can have a bunch of preset here. I've already covered all the preset if you want to check that out, and you can pretty much play around with different kinds of preset here. So you can pretty much take airbag, which is a pretty dense, as you can see right now, and I don't remember which preset I worked with personally, but what you can do is you can go for something like an airbag, and we are going to use another cloth to push this kind of inwards. So the first thing is the overall radius on this is a bit too much, so I'm going to scale this down and see how this plays off. Alright, so this should be good enough. And the second thing we have to take care of is the overall collision thickness. So if I select my cloth here and go to the overall cloth shape here, you have collision, and collision thickness determines how much wider, or you can say in width, the overall scale of the nCloth dimension is. By that I mean, if I turn on my collision thickness, as you can see, this is the overall radius of the collision thickness. If I increase this, as you can see, the overall proportion of the primitive is still at the same level, but the overall collision thickness has been changed. So that means this will be the colliding area. So if I lower this, so if I make this 0, you can see the overall polygons here. So I'm going to make this 0.10, and then you have self collision, how the overall polygon is going to react with each other. So I'm going to keep it to default. So let's play this now, and you can see much more better results. So we are going to be doing the same with the torus here with our passive collider collision thickness, and let's change this to 0.10. So this is the 0 value, and I think the overall 0.10 should be good enough for this, and I'm going to turn this off now. Okay. Alright, so let's increase some height on this. So I'm going to take this, bring this up a bit, and let's create a camera, and let's get into our camera here, and I'm going to set my view to something like this. I've set up my project setting to the 1K resolution. You can do the same for your project, and I'm going to lock my camera. So now when the cloth falls, it looks something like this. So let's create another cloth for this, and I'm going to take another sphere. Let's bring this up, and I'm just going to check how the overall second radius of my sphere is. So right about that size, I believe. So let's scale this down to something like that, and that should be good enough. Let's move this up, and I'm going to move this a bit more on the upside, and let's create the nCloth. I'm going to do the same with this. I'm going to make the preset to something like an airbag. If you go to the dynamic properties, you can see the overall what makes this airbag. So you can see the friction value, you can see the stretch resistance, and the overall mass on this. So let's play this and see how this is behaving. Right, so it's behaving pretty nicely, but we have one thing, and that is obviously this is not going through with this. So what we can do is either get rid of the overall stretch resistance that it has on this, so I can make this a value a little lower, or I can change the scale, whatever works. Alright, so I can go even lower. I'm going to keep going lower, and then I'm going to, so as you can see now it completely pushes through. So because we have more less stretch resistance towards this, so I'm going to add a bit more value so it's not stretching as much. Alright, so it's squeezing nicely. I'm going to keep the value a little higher. So the pressure on the overall sphere is more with the other cloth. So let's see how this. Alright, so there you go. And then you have this guy. So I can do the same with this. I can reduce the overall stretch resistance, or I can just simply scale this down a bit. I think it was this one, yeah. Alright, so this should be good enough. And let's play this now. Alright. So I think we have to manage a bit more collision thickness on this. So either we can change the collision thickness, but I think we have already set that up, so I don't think I'm going to change this and see how that plays off again. And let's hit play, and I think it's working really nicely. So I'm going to change a bit more scale on this, just scale this down so it squeezes in perfectly, or we can just reduce the amount of stretch resistance. Alright, so it's not exactly going as we planned because the overall scale of this is a bit too small to push through it. So I'm going to, so this is just a trial and error process to see what exactly works for you. So from here, as you can see, it gets stuck. And from here, what we can do is I'm going to lower this to something like a 25 here. And let's see how that pays off. Alright, let's keep going lower. Okay, so I'm going to go to like something like a 15, and then you have one more thing, which is a compression resistance. That means how much it's going to compress or lose its overall integrity. So I'm going to make this something like 8, and let's play this again. Alright, so there you go. So the overall cloth is a bit too much, you can say, not looking exactly like an airbag. So I'm going to increase the value of the compression so it doesn't lose the overall look and feel of the overall airbag. And then I'm going to play around. Okay, so this is perfect. The values are perfect now. So this is more about trial and error and going through each and every parameters to see how this can play off, or how you can pretty much change the overall cloth, how it's behaving. So there is no right or wrong in this. There is no precise way to determine anything. You just have to play around with it. So now if we hit play, we have a perfect simulation of this looping animation. So then you can take this in After Effects and just loop it over and over again. So from here, I'm going to just simply increase some divisions into this. I'm going to make the overall, go to attribute editor, and from the polysphere, I'm going to make this 40 and 40, and I'm going to do the same with this. Let's make this 40 and 40. And from here, I'm going to select both of these and go to end catch, create new catch, and object replace. Alright, so one thing you'll notice is when you increase the divisions, the cloth is behaving differently, obviously because it has more divisions. So when I play this off, you can see that the cloth is a bit more bouncy because it has more subdivisions to, you can say, process that. So it's a bit more bouncy and a little bit of rigidness. So either you can do the same thing, which is just playing around with the parameters to see what goes with this kind of subdivision level, or you can just lower the subdivision level to the earlier one and then simply hit 3 on your keyboard to smooth this out. So I'm going to change the overall subdivision level to back to its original place, because finding more parameters for the higher division will be time consuming for this video and it will take much more longer than that. So I'm going to just use the same subdivision level, and let's create a new catch and replace. Alright, so the catch has been done, and we have one small issue, and which is basically the other cloth is not exactly going through. So I'm just going to select this guy and just lower the value to something like a 14 or maybe like a 13 here. And I think that should be good enough, and I'm going to recast this. Okay, so the catch has been done, and it's going through as we want it to. And I think the stretch resistance is a bit too much on this, so I can go a little higher value to something like a 14. And as I said, it's more about trial and error, so you can just keep going and going. And also I'm going to decrease the overall frame rates on this. to 110. Okay, so I think it's good to go. So let's cast this again. Alright, so the perfect value with this will be the 13, or maybe like a 13.5 or 13 point maybe 2, and I think that should be good enough. And I'm going to create one last catch. Alright, so the catch has been done, and I'm going to get into my camera here and see how this is overall looking, and looks pretty nice. So let's simply hit 3 on your keyboard and to smooth this out, and then we can get into shading. I'm going to take another torus and let's increase the overall radius to 2 and the section radius to 0.2, or like 0.1 maybe, and 0.05 thin will be a pretty nice look. Alright, so this looks good, and from here you can just simply get into the shading. I'm going to create a new material for the torus here. I'm going to call this simple T, and you can either take a preset of some color, or you can just pretty much take anything that you want. And I'm just going to choose a simple color like this, and I'm going to add a new preset for this stand surface. I'm going to call this T2, and let's take maybe like a gold, and I'm going to do the same with this. I'm going to replace this with existing color, and for this one I'm going to add a new color, new shader, and that will be maybe like a simple bubble. You can use that as well. And let's see how the IPR is looking overall. So we don't have any light in our scene, so I'm going to take a simple directional light just so we have some light in our scene. Alright, let's play. So we have something like this. Alright, so it'll be a little bit more easier if you are using any HDRI or like a simple physical sun and sky, like something like this. So that will be much easier if you are using something like a bubble, or you can just change the overall preset to something like maybe a clay. Right. So you can use that, or maybe something like a balloon, whatever suits you, and then you have a perfect looping animation. So once you're done with this, I'm going to show my earlier file how I rendered this and composited in After Effects. And all you have to do, if you don't know how to do a batch render in Arnold and Maya, I've already covered a video, but let's take a quick note on this. So all you have to do is go to your render settings, and you can change the extension to something like this, where you have multiple frames instead of just single frame. And then in the extension you can add how much number of frames you have. Like for example, I have 110, and from here you can add a name, maybe like loopy flow, something like this, and you can choose your preset 1K, 2K, and your renderable camera, and that's it. So from the overall render here, you can click on the render sequence here. You can simply go to a rendering menu and rendering sequence and click on this box, and from here just select your path where you want to render this and hit render and close, and that's it. So the render image sequence will be rendered at that path. So once your rendered image has been done, you can take that back into the After Effects. So let's open our After Effects. So I'm here in my After Effects, and as you can see, I've already rendered my earlier version of this scene. So this is what I have. If I play this now, I have something like this. So all I did was change the overall shader to a bubble shader for this one, and the rest is the same. And so what I'm going to do is hit Ctrl K on my keyboard to open up my compositing settings, and here I'm going to simply change the overall time here to something like maybe like 40 and 0, and hit enter. So from here, as you can see, I have a bigger timeline, so I'm going to hit Ctrl D, Ctrl D, Ctrl D, Ctrl D, Ctrl D, just hit Ctrl D a couple of times. Either you can manually set them, which is a pretty time consuming, or you can hold Shift and select all of them, go to animation, keyframe assistance, and sequence layers, and hit OK, and there you go. So now you have a looping animation continuously playing on and on and on and on, and there you go. So I'm going to simply go over here, hit N on my keyboard to end that, and right click on this, trim comp to the work area, and now this is good to go. So you can simply go to composition, add to render queue, you can select whatever preset that you want, like QuickTime and your path, and just hit render, and you'll be good to go. So I hope you like this overall loopy animation, how we work with the nCloth to create abstract looking animation. And the rest setup is pretty straightforward. All we did was use some simple end cloth. You can pretty much create any type of looping animation with this. So this was pretty nice. This was pretty interesting how you can use end cloth to create this amazing animation. So play around with this, try to create something of your own, try to dive into how you can play around with different kinds of primitive, and how you can add a bit more loopy animation with this. And if you get it stuck in somewhere, just play around with the overall parameters you have. Maybe adding a bit more stretch resistance or decreasing it will help you getting that result. Alright guys, so thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Stay home, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.